Welcome to the session research number 4. That is the last of the day. We have the title of the session is INVALSI data is a tool to support innovation and school improvement. We have 4 contributions. In the first one, Cecilia Fissore and Marina Marchisio, we're talking about formative assessment considering English teaching. And I'm curious about the automatic assessment system. We'll see. The second contribution is from Dina Veronese, and it's a report about all the RAVs of all the school of Friuli Venezia Giulia, comparison, including first and second cycle schools. The last 2 are from Serafina Pastore, Scarnera and Palluca, and they're about interim assessments that I admitted I'm quite new to this subject. So let's start with the first one. Cecilia Fissore.
Okay, I share my screen.
Okay. Usually we have 20 minutes, but we have 4 instead of 5. So if you can use also 25 minutes, that's not a problem.
Okay, perfect. Okay, you can see the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Cecilia Fissore, a PhD student at the University of Turin, and today I'm going to talk about use of INVALSI data. Use of INVALSI data for formative assessment activities in English teaching. This presentation is a joint work with the Professor Marina Marchisio of the University of Turin. School has a primary role in assuring a proper language education and in the development of language skills. And the INVALSI English test was introduced in 2018 to measure the ability to understand written text or text to listen to. For the test, INVALSI has adopted the levels established in the common European framework of reference for languages, from pre-A1 preschool level to B2. It is important to underline that the level descriptors refer to the textual complexity in terms of topics, language, vocabulary, and so on. The operation that the reader or the listener know how to do, and the authenticity of the text for a communicative approach to language learning. Also, the national guidelines defined by MUR are closely linked to the CEFR. In particular, the Italian National Guideline for Secondary Education state B2 as the English exit level to be reached by students at the end of upper secondary school. According to the 2019 INVALSI report, the results are not good. 65% of the Italian students do not reach level B2 in the listening test, and 48% do not reach level B2 in the reading test. This situation clashes with the globalized nature of the world and may preclude opportunities for future employment. INVALSI tests inevitably don't measure all aspects of students' learning. The results of the test indicate the level of competence of students, but certainly cannot explain the reason for a positive or negative results, and they cannot evaluate, guide, and monitor the learning process. This type of evaluation takes place through formative assessment, a continuous process that sees students as active protagonists and that motivates them to advance in their learning. The definition of formative assessment that we adopt is the definition of Black and William of 2009, well known in literature. This definition says that practice in a classroom is formative to the extent that evidence about students' achievement is elicited, interpreted, and used by teachers, learners, and their peers to make decisions about the next step in instruction that are likely to be better or better founded than the decisions they would have taken in the absence of the evidence that was elicited. The authors conceptualize formative assessment through the following 5 key strategies. One of the most important is providing feedback that moves students forward. Technology can offer a valid support for language teaching and learning and for the formative assessment. Our Delta Research Group of the University of Turin has developed and tested a model for automatic formative assessment with an automatic assessment system. The characteristics of the model are availability. The tests are always available to students with no time limit and number of attempts. Algorithm-based question and answers, open answers, classical open answers, immediate feedback. The results are quickly calculated and shown to students while they are still focused on the task. Interactive feedback. Immediately after answering a question, the system can show if the answer is correct and propose to students a step-by-step guided resolution. And finally, contextualization. The assignments should be developed within a real-world context, which engages students more and helps them to better understand the contents. The goal of this research is the design of materials for a training course for secondary school English teachers. The teacher training course focuses on adaptive questions designed for standardized assessment, INVALSI question, to question for formative assessment with the use of automatic assessment system. During the training course, teachers will have to create a question with automatic formative assessment and reflecting on how to adapt the request to the different needs of students. Our research question is how to use INVALSI data to design automatic formative assessment activities to facilitate the learning of the English language. The documents used for the research available on the INVALSI website are the CEFR, the descriptors of the levels of English, the English test, reading and listening comprehension, in particular the INVALSI English test at the end of second cycle of instruction, obviously the INVALSI 2019 test report, the examples of INVALSI English questions, and a very interesting and formative training videos on the INVALSI Open YouTube channel. The methodology for the design of materials was the following. Initially, the study of the CEFR and the expected skills for the English language at the end of first and second cycle of instruction. Analysis of the INVALSI English test structure and the type of question of the task. Analysis of the INVALSI report, study of examples of INVALSI questions, and design and implementation with the automatic assessment system of question for formative assessment, starting from the INVALSI examples. And finally, reflection on the strategies to be used to make formative assessment effective. Now the results. We have designed and implemented in the automatic assessment system 30 questions of different types, 15 for the reading test and 15 for the listening test. INVALSI questions intended for standardized assessment were transformed into questions for formative assessment. And during the design of the questions, the possible strategies for formative assessment were analyzed. The INVALSI questions fit very well with our automatic formative assessment model because the context of the text and the audio file used in the tests are real and relevant to the social and professional life of the students. Each task is preceded by a specific instruction in English, and in all tasks, the first question is the example. The goal of the test is to assess all different reading and listening methods, and the type of question for the reading and for the listening test are multiple choice questions, multiple matching questions, short open answer, and true false not given questions, or true false and justification. Now we show two representative examples, one of the reading comprehension test and one for the listening comprehension test. The first one is a question for the B1 level reading comprehension test. The figure shows the INVALSI task implemented in the automatic assessment system. This task was also presented by INVALSI experts in webinars and training videos on the INVALSI Open. The evaluation method chosen for the task is the true-false justification. The students must read the text. In the slide, there is not all the text, but only a short extract. The student must read the text and the 9 statements from Q1 to Q8, and then in the table for each statement, the student must indicate whether it's true or false and must provide a justification by identifying the first 4 words of the sentence that contains such justification. In this case, if the students have had a final feedback, correct or wrong, but if the student's wrong, we don't know why, and we can give the right feedback at the students. In this slide, there is the previous example transformed into a question with the formative assessment with the use of automatic assessment system. In the first part of the question, the same INVALSI question is reported. At the end of the question, there is a verifica button, which means verify in Italian, that the students can click at any time for a maximum of 3 times to verify the correctness of the answer given. In this case, students have immediate feedback while they are focused on the task. And the feedback is about the correctness of the answer and on which part, if any, were wrong. In this case, the strategy applied to make the formative question was to divide the text into 3 parts and make the students concentrate at one part at the time. After the first part, students are offered a guided path divided into 4 parts. In the first part concerns the meaning of couch surfing, that is the title of the question. And the next 3 parts guide students to understand the respective 3 parts of the text. through different type of questions, such as multiple choice, open answer questions, or fill in the blank with the drop-down menu. Students go through the text step by step in a reformulated way in order to understand all aspects of the text and the statements of the initial part. In these slides, there is the first part of the text and the question about what is couch surfing. And in this slide, there is the second part and the third part. At the end of each part of the questions, the students get immediate feedback. In this slide, there is an example of feedback. And the path is guided in the sense that students cannot go on until they complete the questions and get the feedback. Finally, the interactive feedback with multiple attempts for each part enhance students to test themselves and rethink about the reasoning and correct themselves. This second example is a question for the B2 level listening comprehension test. The title of the INVALSI task is BBC News at Midday. On the left, there is the INVALSI task implemented in the automatic assessment system. And on the right, there is the example transformed into a question with formative assessment. The type of evaluation chosen for this task is multiple matching. To answer the question, students must associate short spoken text by different speakers with short summaries present in the item from A to H. After reading the instruction, students have 1 minute to read the task, the items in the second table, and listen to the audio twice. Okay. Also in this case, in transformation of the task into a question for formative assessment, the first part is the same as the INVALSI task, but compared to the INVALSI test, students can interact with the audio, play, stop, go forward, backwards, stop and play, and so on. Anytime for multiple attempts, and they have 3 attempts to answer the question. In this slide, there is a second part of the question. 7 statements are proposed referring to the audio file and taken directly from the original text. Listen to the audio again. Students find the original words in the statements and can reflect again on their meaning. After that, they must associate each statement with the correct reformulated statement in the second part of the question with the same meaning. Again, students have 3 attempts to answer the question. In conclusion, to improve INVALSI results and to overcome students' difficulties, it is important to adopt formative assessment strategies. The importance of immediate interactive feedback is essential for both students and teachers. Through formative feedback, students can focus on the task and not on the result, only on the results. But at the same time, teachers can progressively monitor students' learning and get valuable feedback. Example was shown from language skills, development and preparation for INVALSI tests. The activity will be proposed to teachers in order to reflect on the characteristics of formative assessment and create materials to be used in their daily teaching. The pandemic emergency, of course, made us reflect on the importance of training teachers in the use of new technologies and methodologies. And finally, it's very important that students learn how to use technologies also for educational purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. Okay.
Don't see the chat. Okay.
Check if there are any questions. There are not questions at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, so this work is planned to make a training course for teachers, no? It's like an application that should be which the teachers could be trained to use. I suppose it's.
Yes. I explain you. This training activities, transformation of INVALSI question into question for formative assessment was conducted by us last years, but with the mathematician secondary school teachers, because I and the Professor Marina Marchisio are two mathematicians. The training activities showed the effectiveness of the automatic assessment system, and now we have think to propose the same experience to English teachers, but the teachers have no problem to learn how to use the automatic assessment system to create questions and to experiment these questions with the students.
Okay. I'm not an expert of teaching. Is it planned to be used in by themselves from the students, or always with the presence of a teacher which can help them to interpret the feedback?
I think both, but students are autonomous in the activities. Also the INVALSI, for example, the INVALSI audio for the listening comprehension test is structured with the pause, the first listening and the second listening. For me, there are no problem for students.
Okay, and you say there are three attempts.
Yes, or more.
Okay. And the data are saved in some way, or just for the feedback, for the direct, for the interactive feedback, and this.
Yes, yes, in the automatic assessment system, all the tests carried out by students are collected, and also every attempt at any questions. In fact, it is very important for teachers to study students' mistakes at any passage of the question.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that.
If I may just to add one thing, the idea is to use this marvelous database repositories of INVALSI because all teachers can, of course, use it, and to prepare these adaptive questions for formative assessment in order to have an adaptive teaching and an adaptive learning for the students, especially because there are students with different style of learning, so they can use also at home in order to fill the gaps and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll check if there are any questions. Yeah, there's a question from Serafina Pastore.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Turn it on?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I would like to know if feedback is only the right question, the right answer, or it's something different. Because in my perspective of formative assessment, feedback is something that can allow reflection for teachers just to foster the learning. So in this way, I think it's only the right information and nothing else. Can you clarify this aspect, please?
Ria? No, the feedback is not only right or wrong aspect, but is interactive feedback that provide guided paths step by step to reflect, to guide students on how to answering the questions. In fact, in the development of the questions, teachers should try to understand what the students' difficult may be and how to develop interactive feedback to help them to answer.
So questions are developed by teachers?
Yes, in this case,
okay.
are developed by us, but in the training course are developed by teachers.
Because otherwise it's not formative.
No, it's
Okay.
for that have more experience than us.
Thank you.
Students.
Okay. We see any other questions? Oddio. Okay. Okay, any other questions?
In math, for instance, in math, we use the same method, and we made an experimentation, and we started with many classes. Some of them were involved in the experimentation, and some of them were just control classes. And we started with some questions from INVALSI considered difficult. It means that the score of the correct answer is around 30%. We started with a path for with the students. The teacher presented in classes and also left at home some adaptive questions. At the end of this path, about 1 month, we asked again to the students to answer some INVALSI question of the same level of difficulty. And we noted that at the beginning, all the classes, the level was 30%. At the end, the students that participate to the experimentation had reached a score of right answers of 58%. So it was very, very important because, and this research is done also with other colleagues of the University of Torino, who are experts of didactic of foreign languages at the Department of Foreign Languages, of course, because it's important to put together not only the methodologies for digital education, but also the competencies in didactic of foreign languages.
Yeah. We have one more question from Giulia Montefiore.
Hi. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. It was pretty interesting. Thanks. Yes, I have a question regarding the last thing that was said by Professor Marchisio regarding the improvement that there was before and after the implementation. I'm wondering whether also the school scores, like the scores that the teachers were given to the students, also improved. So my question would be if that improvement was just due to the teaching to the test, or if they actually improve their effective learning by having this continuous assessment sort of thing, this formative assessment. If you have that kind of data.
They used if I understood well the question, the teachers use this kind of methodology inside the daily teaching. So it means exactly with the topic that at the beginning of the year they decided to teach. And so we noted that the formative assessment starting from the repository of INVALSI, the main aim was to have an effective learning for the daily teaching and for the, but we used in order to have a tool, an evaluation of the experimentation, because otherwise it's difficult to show that it works. We of course started from neutral questions of INVALSI, so at the beginning and at the end. So I must admit that the teachers continue by themselves to use these methodologies, and also the students are very happy.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can go on. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
We can go on with the second one. Dina Veronese. Yeah, you can share the screen.
Okay. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dina. Good afternoon. I am Dina Veronese, the author of this contribution. My English is not adequate for this situation. I understand quite well, but I really cannot speak fluently. My colleague Francesca Grando will help me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Good evening to everybody. This is the Dina's work. In the school year 2019-2020, schools were committed to developing social reporting for the first time as the final moment of the strategic documentation cycle. In this phase, it was possible to plan the re-edition of the new self-assessment report we call RAV, with the provision of useful evidence for the internal self-assessment process, as well as context data for the comparison between schools with the same socioeconomic cultural status of the student. The virtuous connection between results, processes, and context aims to favor enacted rather than suffered evaluation. The motivational drive was dictated by the fact that, as the survey by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development suggests, schools that pursue some form of accountability achieve a higher quality performance of about 25% compared to those who don't. The evidence collected shows a school that still pays little attention to the educational needs of a complex society capable of investing in a social capital, participation and cooperation of students, families, communities, and professional capital, knowledge, skills, staff values. The study of school RAV of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region implicitly suggested the necessary elements for any training projects for school managers and teachers, also through the opportunities of the territorial networks of schools and function.
Objective.
The object of this research, the process objectives referred to the priorities and goals that characterize the RAV and which are described in detail in the PTOF, have an annual value and find their right definition in the improvement and training plan. The choices made by the schools regarding the process objectives will subsequently be justified and recognized in the reporting phase. The new edition of the RAV was analyzed taking into account the characteristics of a good RAV, that is the adequacy, consistency, reliability, relevance, and concreteness, according to the principle of equity, participation, quality, and differentiation, as suggested by the methodological note and operational guide of May 2019.
Okay. Questo posso andare avanti. Okay.
The school, capable of systematically managing professional, organizational, and contextual factors, are the ones that are capable of implementing a broad spectrum management philosophy that can see its evolutionary paths as well as the impact that external changes could have in strategic analysis on the organization. Knowing the methodological approaches of empirical and experimental research in the educational fields allows to enter into the specific merit of the research methodology, broadening the gaze from the learning outcomes to the investigation on other dimensions that interact in the drafting of the strategic school documentation. The regional monitoring developed for USR Friuli Venezia Giulia, as envisaged by the Plan for Teacher Training, following laws 107/2015, is in line with the outcome by the school questionnaire. The graphs are shown for an overall general reading and for a distinct reading between the first and the second cycle of education. Excluding foreign language skills and schoolwork for obvious specificities relating to the various school levels, it is interesting to highlight that the investments for training on the topics highlighted, organizational and didactic autonomy, and evaluation and improvement, exceed just 20% of the funds available. These issues, as we will see in the evidence gathered, are very important for a good elaboration of the RAV. The school questionnaire developed by INVALSI for this region shows that 82% of the schools of the first and the second cycle of education declare that they adhere to school networks to improve teaching and educational practices with an average of 3 or 5 partnerships for 45% of first cycle school and 47% of second schools compared to a national average of 48% of first cycle schools and 30% of second cycle schools. On the other hand, planning in a continuity process between age levels of schools represents a goal not yet completely achieved, as it is practiced by about 60% in first cycle school, 50% in high school, 53% in technician, and 38% in professional schools. In the same way, also time flexibility seems to be little exploited as an opportunity. In fact, only the primary school reaches 30% compared to the national average, which is 29%, together with the intermediate stage school, age from 10 to 13, that reaches 36%, compared to the national average of 28%. And when it comes to the secondary school, we find that the average is 31% compared to the national average of 23%. Technicians, 35% out of 26%, and professionals with 24% compared to 38% nationwide. Another significant element found involves training that has concerned mostly the regulatory aspect relating to safety and prevention in workplace, or aspects relating to teaching with a focus on the use of digital technologies applied to didactics and methodology for a percentage of 30% in the first cycle and 37% in second cycle school.
Empirical investigation.
Okay.
Dillo.
Empirical investigation. The survey conducted required considerable study of the materials developed by INVALSI that has favored a more careful conduct of research, and from a scientific point of view, evidence has been elaborated on the basis of the operational indications contained in the methodological note and operational guide version of May 2019. With the exception of the key competencies and citizenship, all the other areas, such as the educational result, the result in the national standardized test, and the overtime result, are all accompanied by evidence. The process aims in this phase, referable to educational and didactic practices and to managerial and organizational practices, show a position that is not yet adequate. The same note reports that in order for an effective improvement path to be undertaken, a limited number of priorities, 1 or 2, should be identified within 1 or 2 areas of student outcomes. Schools that have used PTOF platform in the CD portal will find the priorities deduced from the RAV preloaded in the second section. Finally, schools must review priorities and goals so that define them. They refer to the expected outcomes and the actions of the school for their achievement. The same note clarifies that the priorities and goals must be elaborated in an observable and/or measurable form, articulating their contents because they represent the goals of the school in its improvement action for the 3-year period of reference. The process objectives represent an operational definition of the activities on which it is intended to act concretely in order to achieve the strategic priorities that have been identified and constitute the operational goals to be achieved in the short term, 1 year. So now we can see the principles that guide the self-assessment that are equity, participation, quality, differentiation, and the characteristics of a good RAV: adequacy, consistency, reliability, relevance, and concreteness. Okay, now we have to pay attention. What to pay attention to setting the index for the evaluation of the data. Also within the same note, the issues of inconsistency between the results of the self-assessment and identified priorities are described. Direct observation on the definition expressed by school has been the subject of multiple revisions. Only by comparing the text describing the priorities with the text describing the goals, it was possible to outline the following criteria with a definition of value from 1 to 5. 1, the document is completed. 2, the compilation of the document is relevant to the reference area. 3, the document is reliable as it is based on evidence available on the platform. 4, the exhibition document is congruous between the analysis and the choice. 5, the document is concrete because the objectives are clear and measurable. The table below describes the values done to the documents for each area chosen by the individual school. Value 1, judgment is not appropriate because the document has been filled in, but the content is not relevant to the priorities and goals. Value 2, not appropriate. The compilation is relevant to the area, but it is not reliable because it is not based on evidence, and therefore there is no congruity between the analysis and the choice. The document is not concrete because the objectives are not clear and measurable. and you can find definitions that express concepts that are sometimes important but not pertinent, and work plans are often confused. It is not uncommon to read the decontextualized process objective. Value 3, not always appropriate. The compilation is relevant to the area. It refers to evidence, but there is no congruity between the analysis and the choice. The objective remains too generic and or inadequate. The compilation is not relevant to the reference area, but it's based on evidence because the objective is clear and measurable. There are some irrelevant or not relevant generalization. For example, process objectives, consideration regarding the school's vision and mission. Value 4, adequate. The compilation is relevant to the area. It refers to evidence, but there is little congruity between the analysis and the choice. The goal is clear and measurable. Example, improving math or Latin. The compilation is relevant to the area, refers to evidence, and there is congruity between the analysis and the choice. The clarity of the objective remains weak. And 5, very adequate, comply with all defined criteria. Okay, some consideration. The area for educational results is the one of greatest interest by school, with the percentages close to the area of key competencies and citizenship. This area is mainly followed by institutes that incorporate primary and intermediate school levels, whilst the secondary school has a greater interest in the area of long-term results since they are linked to school work alternation and career guidance. 36% of the school observed choose to work on 2 areas, but the sum of the schools that have chosen to work on 3 or 4 areas reaches 41%. The area of key competencies and citizenship is not included because it does not report evidence and the evaluation criteria cannot be applied.
Priorities and goals of school.
Okay, the first bar has a... No, non è questo.
I'm sorry. Priorities and goals.
No, questo l'abbiamo...
Finish. Questa
okay.
Finish. Questa qua, ok. Perfetto. Perfectly.
Okay. The area of key competencies and citizenship is not included because it does not report evidence. The evaluation criteria cannot be applied. The graph of the first cycle education is less aligned. The best results are concentrated in the central bar, which corresponds to the area dedicated to the national standardized test, better known in the first cycle of education.
The first cycle.
Okay.
Priorities and goals. Avete letto questo? Sì.
Sì.
Okay. So.
And priorities and goals in the second cycle, the results of the second education cycle are more aligned and better. There are uncertainties that need to find better execution.
Perfect.
Consideration. The first bar has a high value number 1, as the priorities and goals are described are not adequate or relevant. The second bar presents the best results in both cycles of education because it concerns the area of result of national standardized test. The third and last bar refers to the area of long-term results that have been less pursued but better processed by schools. The percentage of priorities and target that are placed in the lowest range with values 1 and 2 is very high and is equal to 29.79%, quite high if compared to the national average that is estimated at around 20%. Encouraging but not enough, the percentage of 62.77% of schools that work well, value 4 and 5. As regards the value 3, equivalent to an evaluation defined as not always adequate, it should be noted that the corresponding percentage is 7.44%. This percentage can be added to the positive values indicated above, so as to reach 70.21% of schools that have worked correctly. But if we added 7.44% to 29.79%, we would reach 37.23% of schools that have not worked adequately.
Process of choices.
This is the objective or process chosen by schools, and one from until 4, good point, good values. From 5 to 7, bad values.
It's okay. See.
And here, schools develop a process objectives that refer to educational and teaching practices with a percentage of 70.21%. Schools develop process objectives that refer to management and organizational practices with a percentage of 29.79%.
Obiettivi divisi per area, vediamo veloci.
These are the objective by the area. The first is integration with the territory, development and enhancement, strategic and organizational, continuity and orientation, inclusion and differentiation, learning environment, and curriculum planning and evaluation.
Area number 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Considerations. Management and organizational practices are less pursued than educational and didactic practices, especially as regards the strategic and organizational orientation of school, integration with the territory, and relations with families. If we relate the data monitoring, the training, and the result of this research, the evidence is clear and indicates the path toward which schools should be oriented, offering point for reflection within and outside the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Delle conclusioni.
Conclusioni.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay. I've got some questions. This work started from the regional school office, as you said, no? So you had the data school by school.
Yes.
School with the RAB okay.
All regional school, yes.
All regional school, yeah, the 82% who filled in the RAB. And so you analyzed how much they fill in all the different area and judge it as appropriate or non-appropriate.
Exactly, yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
The focus of the research, of DINA research, is this aspect, yes.
Okay, okay. So I'm curious, the regional school office, how can use it? I mean,
I hope restituzione.
For the school, as a restitution for the school, DINA hopes, and to guide the school in the future, maybe.
Okay, okay, okay. And I've got also one suggestion. You can also add in your graphs. You can add also the bar of the same percentage in Italy, if you have the data, of course. So maybe to compare each each bar to the Italian or to the neighbor regions could be also interesting. Check.
Okay, con un'altra regione, with another region.
Or with Italy, or with the geographical area.
Quindi ti consiglio di provare questo. Ok.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask you just one thing, Marina? Do you know similar research in other regions?
No. No.
Okay. No, just to...
It's very new. Veramente no, infatti ho fatto molta fatica per...
Dina works a lot for this research, and there wasn't
non c'erano esempi.
Non c'erano example to
work.
No. Probably it could be interesting also to that other people in other regions can do the same in order also to make a comparison. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if maybe the minister did something about RAV, comparing. If the ministry did something, did some comparison analysis of RAV, I don't know.
Il ministero lui non sa se l'ha fatto altri.
Non ci sono lavori.
No, niente. Okay.
No. Ho cercato molto.
Dina is the first.
Pioneer. Pioneer.
Vabbè. Thank you.
Pioniera. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So we can go on with the third presentation by Serafina Pastore. Okay.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Serafina Pastore.
Okay.
I'm a researcher in didactics. My research topics are formative assessment and teacher assessment and data literacy. And I present today a paper that is in partnership with ISTAT, and more specifically with Aldo Scarnera and with Lucia Pallucca. She is the former principal of the school involved in this project. I have made a match of the two presentations that you see in the program, and I will start with the second one and then go through the first because they are in this way better logically aligned. Okay, let's start with the agenda. This is a study that we started in 2019, and I will introduce you the conceptual framework, first of all, and the research aims. And then I will focus on two different aspects related to the implementation of this interim assessment that we have realized in this school. And more specifically, these are the focus of these two presentations. So the interim assessment of design, and the second one, the validation process that we have realized on this test. A commonplace statement about educational assessment field is that, educators are expected to use data to improve teaching and learning. However, this is another commonplace statement. Data use sometimes can be really challenging and complex. And even after decades of accountability pressures, teachers still struggle with assessment and with using data to inform instructional practices, often because they receive inadequate data-related professional learning. We know that generally educators consider using data as a difficult task, and they sometimes cite issues such as pressure, time, school leadership, school principal leadership, and of course a lack of knowledge about how to best use data to improve instruction. The literature in this topic is very, very large and differentiated over the years, and sometimes the professional development is considered at the same time as, I use this expression, the original sin of all the problems teachers have in school and in their daily practice. And at some times, the same, you know, the key aspect that can solve all the problem. But this is not true, and sometimes it's another commonplace statement in my perspective. The professional development literature, more specifically, sometimes appears to be very robust about this, especially when it comes to you know, what are the characteristics of effective professional learning in a broader sense. But supporting teachers in becoming users or better users of educational data is not a focus of this body of research. And this is a gap in literature. And consequently, this research project tried to, you know, respond to this or fill this gap in some way, maybe just a bit ambitious, but this is my hope, to try to develop a professional development that can be respond to these professional needs, and at the interplay of professional learning perspective, teacher assessment, literacy, and data use that are strictly related. We know from the literature that it's possible to identify what are good conditions or the better conditions that facilitate teacher learning and teacher professional development. And at the same time, what are the characteristics of the professional learning activities? For example, that they have to be more engaging or job embedded if we want to ensure that the professional development can be transferred in teaching practice. And this is just a bit challenging, especially when we talk about assessment and data literacy. This is the research timeline and the research design for this project. We move from the assumption that continuing development and learning of teachers is one of the key to improve school quality. And moving from this assumption, we have designed this professional development on assessment and data literacy. What is our main idea is that working on knowledge and skills in the educational assessment domain, it is possible to instigate in some way a review of conception, attitudes, perception, or beliefs teachers have in general for educational domain in general, and of course in our case about assessment, and consequently to change their assessment practices. All of these efforts in following the De Simone model, this is our model of professional development, it would be, or it should be, possible an improvement in student learning. And of course, we will use, when we hope next year, the INVALSI result to check if we are right or not. More specifically, we are trying to implement this professional development, stressing the practical dimensions through the creation and the implementation of an interim assessment in the school. In this school, this is a primary and middle school in the Bari district. Over the last year, we have worked on the first phase of this item design development and on the validation of the test designed by teachers. Why assessment? Why interim assessment? It was a question during the presentation of this session. Interim assessment is a strange kind of assessment in some way, because it merges in both the formative assessment aims, so it aims to foster and support student learning, but in a particular modality because it is structured and following, the characteristics of the standardized and large-scale assessment characteristics. Interim assessment can be used to support teachers to not only monitor and improve student learning within a classroom, but also to compare different performances between classrooms, the same grades, within the school, and to, in some way, inform what are the instructional practices that can be designed not only at micro level, but also at meso level, so at the school level in the improvement plan. And in my perspective, of course, using this kind of assessment, you can in some way work also on your teacher assessment and data literacy, in teachers assessment and data literacy. The story, this is a long story for this kind of research, because as I've told you, we started in June 2019. And for the COVID, of course, both training and research phases have been in standby for different months over the last year. In the previous INVALSI seminar in November 2019, we have presented a paper on the possible use of the INVALSI data at micro level. And we reported, in that case, the first attempt that we have realized by these teachers to create a homemade test within the school. In this first case, teachers completely modeled the structure, the format, and the rationale of the INVALSI test. And data gathered on the first attempt have been useful for teachers to, decide what to do about the implementation of the interim assessment over the next step. And as you can see, these are it's not really clear, I know, but this is one of the work that my colleague has made, because the first administration made using tests very similar to the INVALSI test was not really sustainable. And at the end, slightly useful for teachers. So we have tried to understand how to support teachers in the interpretation and in the use of this data. And it was very, very hard and complicated in some way. We have performed descriptive and factorial analysis just to support teachers in reviewing the test. I will just show you, for example, the FEA, exploratory factorial analysis, sorry, that has been performed to find latent structure and support teachers to understand what was the aspects to be really important in this kind of assessment. But at the end, it doesn't work. It didn't work. And so we decided to change something. And more specifically, we review all this process, because it was not at the end of the game really supportive for teachers. So I think this was the very important lesson learned for teachers. We are talking about professional development. So the most important thing was that both the microanalysis, the microanalysis of INVALSI data, or the reduplication of the modeling of the INVALSI data was not useful for teachers. And we decided to develop a different perspective in this way. And we discussed over the first month of the 2020, so during the first lockdown, how to change the structure and how to also deal with also practical problems like time consuming, the administration. Consider, for example, to only this most stupid thing like the printing of the test booklet in-house for the school. And then the more technical aspect like the data collection and data analysis, but also the reporting of this data, not only to students, but also to parents. It was very a huge kind of work for teachers, not really sustainable. So we decided to do something more smart and useful and usable by them. This was our idea in some way. What we have done, first of all, we decided to review our conceptual framework. And to do this, we use two different taxonomies of learning. The first one is RTTI, is an acronym for Remember, Training, Transfer, and Insight, and the classical Anderson model of knowledge. And we have matched these two kinds of taxonomy in order to guide teacher in the construction of the framework for our interim assessment system. Just a few words about RTTI. RTTI, in a very general sense, is a method to improve teaching and learning and enhance student performance. It has been realized by Marinka Drost and Petra Verra in the Netherlands. They are teacher trainers, and they work on the formative assessment perspective. So I selected this model just because it can be placed within the research tradition on educational effectiveness and school improvement, and at the same time can be used to foster teacher assessment literacy and data literacy. The second taxonomy, the Anderson's model of taxonomy, is being used because in this way teachers will be asked to select the right kind of question for the right kind of knowledge that to be assessed. You know that taxonomy generally is used when we talk about assessment and educational assessment. However, there are some other aspects that have been considered because it's been just a bit complicated to realize this conceptual framework. And more specifically, we have considered both the INVALSI frame of references and the standard, the national standard, so the indicazioni, and also the school curriculum. Because in this way, we'll assure the link to the national standards, and we have a comparison between what we are trying to realize and what is the national standards, of course, that is but just coded and designed. The merge of this on-made data with student learning and INVALSI should be support teachers in respond to how are we doing and give them the opportunity to be sure about the validity and quality of data gathered. So I will go through the next presentation, so I will talk just more about the interim assessment. I will do it this way, so it's better. Okay, it works, yeah. Interim assessment is a kind of assessment that has been developed over the years, especially in the US context, after the No Child Left Behind. And this is in some way a benchmark because it can be used to give teachers assessment in their school, but not to make a race, because in some way No Child Left Behind has give this kind of interpretation, but allow educators to monitor the progress of students against state standards and to predict performance, for example, in large-scale assessment administrations. However, the widespread diffusion in the US context, more specifically, sometimes has not been really under control, because sometimes there are very good tests developed by also commercial test developers, but sometimes they are developed locally. And so they are not really validated for the purposes of improving or predict student performances. So we have tried to care and to be really careful also on this aspect. And we have considered to define our frame of reference. And in this way, we stressed the teachers involved in the project to create their frame of reference. Having a frame of reference, also if you are a research, is important, but it's fundamental generally, because it's both like a guide and like a ballast, especially for assessment. That is always a comparative process. So you need to something that is useful for you to read and interpret the data. Otherwise, you have only data and nothing else. The frame of reference allows teachers to make resonant and defensible choice about teaching practices. So it is fundamental to interpret data and make sense of data. But this is not only the things, we need something else. This is another relevant concept, that is alignment. What is alignment in educational assessment? Alignment generally is defined, as you can read, as the alignment, the fact that all the components of an education system consistently work together to achieve the desired goal. So the standards, the curricula, the assessment, and also the instructional practice. So they are, in a sound movement, and there is no, so this misalignment. So there are no unfeasible practices. They are coherent among them. Generally, educational policies inform what practitioners are expected to do. We know this. Alignment is not particularly new in the educational field, and the alignment between an assessment and a set of content standards in a subject area has been for a long time recognized also as evidence of the assessment validity. So this is really important, because we know that an assessment that is not valid is not a good assessment, is not really useful for nothing. And the degree to which the interpretation of an assessment results can be considered accurate is a fundamental aspect in educational assessment. So what to do to ensure a sound assessment? We have tried to work on the alignment also. And what we have done more specifically, we have realized with the 37 teachers involved in this project, 12 different cognitive tests for, as you can read, all these grades, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, in the 3 domains of INVALSI test, Italian, math, and English, but with a strong and radical reduction of the number of the questions of the tasks, because we need something that is more sustainable. Generally, interim assessment tests are made by 7, at least, questions. So in this case, I've tried to manage the need teachers have to monitor some specific aspects, and more specifically the learning outcomes in maths that are the 10 standards for. In order to assure the alignment of the interim assessment, teachers have been invited to consider and carefully read, first of all, the INVALSI frame of references, the national standards, and the school curriculum again. Then we have used the RTTI taxonomy, as I've just told you. And lastly, also the ARA, APA, and MCAA standards, because they are the Bible for validity, so we cannot consider them. Now, this is the first alignment exercise that teachers have made. So teachers have been asked to place in this matrix the national learning goals within the INVALSI frame of reference. And in this way, this was like a warm-up for them, because the most important thing for me was about the school curriculum. But this was also interesting because they have been in some way obligated to read the INVALSI frame of references and the indicazioni, the national standards. And then we have performed the agreement among them using the Kendall coefficient. And as you can see, the strange thing is that despite the Italian frame of reference for math are clearly defined and are also maybe in some way better, clear, organized respect Italian, these teachers have different concordance about the position of the in the matrix of the learning goals and the standards. The second exercise was made about the learning goal, and in this case they have made the same procedure. They have followed the same procedure, and they have put the school learning goal within this matrix. Why this? Why we have done this? Because in this way, teachers have been in some way, led to consider how to create the right task for the right kind of knowledge. And because if I have a learning goal or a piece of knowledge that is in training and in procedural knowledge, my task, my assessment task has to be presented as a stimulus in some way, in a specific way. That is different, of course. That's something that can be related to the remember cognitive domain and to the factual knowledge. So the last part of this process was to consider the alignment. And in this case, you can read the APA and ARA and MCA definition of the alignment and the alignment index. That is really important because it's the evidence to extent to which the test samples the range of knowledge and elicits the processes reflected in the target domain should be provided. So both test and target domain should be described in a sufficient detail so the relation can be evaluated. There are different models and procedures that can be used to assess the alignment, and we use the Porter procedure. This is used to instigate the degree of content alignment between any two statements of content, including content standards. And it characterizes the standards and assessment according to content topics and cognitive demands. Cognitive demand is described by using categories that are specified in each subject area, in our case, English, Italian, and math. And for example, I don't know, cognitive demand in mathematics can be described as the memorize, perform procedures, solve non-routine problems. This categorization procedures, again, another matrix, that enable a comparison of the standards with the assessment. So we have 102 test items, and then 3 different domains, 4 cognitive demands categories that are the RTTI categories, so remember, training, transfer, and insights, and 3 different raters for grade. And these are the alignment index that we have achieved at the end. All this process is in some way like a training, because due to the COVID, as you can imagine, we have not the administration of the test until now. So we are waiting better times to do this. However, I think it's important for me to Tom Gasky thought us that professional development sometimes can be really expensive, and sometimes all the efforts are not productive, not effective to guarantee or to assure an improvement in student learning. That is the most important thing. So the process would be to create something that would be more sustainable in terms of improvement of teacher assessment and data literacy. I hope to say in my time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Serafina Pastore. I'm checking if there are any questions. I have one thing that I didn't understand well. I didn't take notice of the number of the slide, but it was about interim. The definition.
Mm-hmm.
It was different forms administered to students at different times over a school year.
Yes, it can be used in the US context, sometimes 3-4 times a year, but it's too much. They are Americans, you know, they are they are very performative. No, in our case, sorry, I missed this aspect. We are planning to make 2 different administrations. One at in first part of the school year, maybe November, and the second one in April. But due to the COVID, as I've told you, it was not possible to do this. So we'll postpone to the next school year. Yes.
And when you say different forms, you mean different structure of the test?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, yes. We have tried to in the first attempt, as we presented in the last INVALSI seminar, teachers were completely aligned to the INVALSI model. But all my efforts during this time has been to, forget INVALSI. You are not INVALSI. You have to design an assessment task that is useful for you, that you can use. It's something different. This is really formative. Otherwise, it's teaching to the test. It's something different.
Yeah, I agree. And I have another doubt. I think it was slide 39. 12 cognitive tests.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes, because
12
they are,
for each grade.
No, sorry, I forget to tell. In English, only for the 5th and 6th grade. So we have Italian and math for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. And then English only for 5th and 6th grade.
Okay.
It's clear? I have to read. Where is
39, I think 39.
Is it? No, 39. You're better than me. You remember better than me.
I took notice. I took a notice. I'm not remembering.
This is it. Thank you. Okay. Yes. And I was telling about the difficulty for teachers to reduce also the number of questions. So we have selected what is really important to just to ensure, as I've told you, the alignment with the INVALSI and at the same time, the alignment with the school curriculum. Okay?
Okay. There's a question from Giulia Montefiore. Please,
Yes.
Go on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, thanks a lot for the presentation. Very, very interesting. I have a couple of maybe three sort of questions. The first one is,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, because like I am doing my PhD on data use, so I'm like, yes.
Ah, okay, good.
The first question is something I've been interested in. Le prove comuni o prove parallele tra classi
I've
parallele.
lost you, sorry. I've lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just that there's going on
Maybe
with the video.
Ok. Prove comuni or prove per classi parallele. Could we consider that as a sort of like interim assessment or a proto version of it? And
okay.
Yeah, and sorry, connected to this, what is the role? Like, how important is the alignment part between, like, you know, the different objectives that you mentioned? Yes, that's my first question. I would say, because yeah.
Serafina Pastore, we can't hear you anymore.
I'm sure. I will.
Okay. Okay.
I understand that you asked me something about the product. What? Sorry. Che ho fatto? Non vi vedo più.
Okay, now we can see you, Serafina.
Ok.
Yeah,
Ma io non vi vedo più. Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to reply to the prove parallele. Okay. I would like to avoid to use this expression because in my experience as a researcher and as a teacher trainer also, they are realized without the conceptual framework, with no attention to how to interpret the data and what we really need for this data. So sometimes they are developed and perceived also by teachers and then by students as something that is performative. My students, my class, now, this is completely, you know, out and far from the perspective of the improvement of student performances and the idea of create something that should be predictive about the future performances of students. In my idea, I would like to realize something that should be useful and should be support teachers to predict how students will be and how they will perform in the INVALSI test, but without the teaching to the test.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first question. I didn't hear the other thing. Sorry.
No problem. I was asking what the role of alignment was, but by referring to the
it's fundamental.
I think, yes,
it's so fundamental. I know. Yeah. I'm conscious that in some way I'm American colonized because my study has been realized in that country, and but you need, because consider, for example, the effects that teachers should change or could change their assumptions about the INVALSI test. We are in 2020, 2021, and there are still teachers in our school system that don't consider how INVALSI test can be useful. we don't need it. I've made a research recently in a qualitative perspective with interview, and they told me, no, we don't need it. After so many years, what we have done, there are very, you know, large gaps, deep gaps in the assessment literacy and in data literacy. The last presenters was about the using of RAV. How many teachers in school are involved in the RAV? And how many of them can understand what kind of data can be used to develop the improvement action for the school? How many of them? It's a long process, I know.
Yeah.
With professional development sometimes is not really effective, and this is why I prefer to create something that would be more practical for teachers. I was like a mentor for them. I worked together with them on this process. I avoid as soon as possible to be the university teachers who say something and say, do this, and nothing else. No, this is my perspective, of course.
Thanks. And the last thing that I wanted to ask was the role of the meso level, because I was reading some, like, maybe I remember it wrong, but
the rule of, there is noising, I don't know, the rule of,
I was reading some literature regarding interim assessment, and maybe I might remember this wrong, but I think in the US there is the role of the meso level, so the district level, and the role that districts have in reducing the costs associated.
Absolutely, because there is a real, yes, the accountability system is really strict in the US, and you know, if school doesn't achieve some results, money have been cut, and schools can close, really, and teachers lose the job. So it's complicated. My American colleagues told me all the time, don't model US. But yes, they are right in some way. But I think they are something that should be also useful to, that can be implemented also in our country. And you talk about some literature. Mendinash and Gammer in this way are exceptional for me, and they are very good point of references if you want to understand what is data literacy. But in European context, also these two colleagues, Drost and Vera, they work together also with Jaap Schivens. So they have worked on the school effectiveness. So these are not misaligned discourses. They are related because the educational system is made by different parts.
Yeah, sorry, I was wondering what you thought would be, because you said there are a lot of costs associated with schools developing these tests, these interim tests in the Italian case, given your research. And I was wondering, what do you think would be the role of the meso level in Italy, given that we have a series of shortcomings? So we are not maybe able to develop the
I can reply to this question because this school is like an happy island. And despite this, I've really fight with teachers because, yes, they, of course, change required a lot of troubles and difficulties for teachers. And also in this context of COVID, it was not really easy to do all this work because we work all the time in remote. So it's really complicated. But we have realized the first pool of tests. So we are waiting for the administration now. I hope to create something that will be scalable. This is my perspective, because as I've told you, one school is not sufficient. I'm conscious of this. This is a great limitation. But in educational research, you know that it's difficult to talk. Also for formative assessment, it's really expensive research in terms of time, and especially in efforts. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There's a little question about from Gustavo Lana.
Yes, may I? Thank you, sir. And here, you can see my ugly face while you're at it. Dr. Pastore, thank you for taking my question. As a headmistress to your school, and you may have already addressed this, but I may have missed it, so let me say it again. As a headmistress to your school, how do you support your staffs in better understanding how to use the data? Because you referred to NCLB, but that produced a lot of data and then nothing happened with it, other than collecting a lot of data. So I am a very strong proponent of data, but then you have to be able to use it for something. How do you yourself support that? Because teachers support the teacher so they can go into the classroom and make use of that data. Thank you for taking my question.
Okay, I hope to reply to you. The first, when we will do the first administration, we will create also a system for the feedback for students. This is the first aspect that I would like to do. As soon as possible, we will make the administration of tests. And the second aspect is related to the creation of the test calls and the fact that this kind of system will be, structured over the years. So teachers will be able to have a longitudinal monitor of student career. I think that in this way, it will be easy also in terms of improvement plans for the school to identify what are the area where instructional strategies have to be reviewed. For example, one of the aspects related to the difficulty to interpret the INVALSI data was related to the identification of what are the weakness area in our school. And in this way, teachers, we will monitor everything from the start of the process until the end, and they will really able to manage the process. Otherwise, it's always something that is external and not really, at the end important for them because they are in their classroom and do their job. But this is not only the perspective of teacher assessment literacy nowadays. So it's really linked to the accountability system and to the school improvement. I don't know if I've replied to your question. The idea is that assessment data can be really useful, not only for instruction or in my classroom as a teacher, but also for the school improvement in general. And I'm watching. I'm looking at my teachers now that are more conscious. In December here in Italy, there's been a new law innovation because the formative assessment has been introduced by law, so it's something really original in our country. And my teachers, these teachers in the school, just know the perspective of the differentiation of kind of knowledge because they can manage this instrument. They know the difference between conceptual, factual, and metacognitive knowledge, and they know that they need different assessment modalities to check if students have reached or not this kind of knowledge. This is assessment literacy.
I have one question.
Yeah, go on.
I agree that teachers need to be trained on data analysis, sure. In the experience of the training course, have you noticed any differences between primary and secondary school teachers?
In my experience, in this case?
In both?
Okay, as I've just told, this school is an happy island. And, you know, the rule of principle has been fundamental to create this kind of process and to implement this kind of process. Generally, primary school teachers are scared about the use of more sophisticated modalities for assessment. They consider that something is, they have a strange perception because they are conscious that they need something that is valid, reliable, robust, but at the same time, they are really not skeptical, but not sure about the quality of their assessment. In the middle school and then also in secondary, the upper school, you know, there is the rule of content domain that in Italy especially will be very predominant. So assessment change is it's nature in some way. But it's strange also because with the new, with the introduction of the formative assessment, with the guidelines started in December, teachers are not trained to formative assessment. They don't know how to use, and they don't know how to create something that should be at the same time robust, available, and valid and reliable. That is not a grade, but is a judgment, is a descriptive feedback. This is a paradox, no? Because they will be more confident, but this is not.
Thank you. I agree with you.
Okay.
So, thank you, Serafina Pastore, for your contribution and for the passion you expressed in the exposition.
Thank you.
I think we can end the session. So thanks to all the speakers, and hope to see you tomorrow if you have time. There are two parallel sessions at 8:30, or there's a plenary session at 11. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.